Senator Whelan left, so we'll take him as well now, if that's okay.
Thanks, Chair, and I'll be brief. I'd just also like to welcome the dignitaries from the NTA, and it's important to put on the record that I know full well the value of the road transport scheme as it operates throughout Laois Offaly and Laois Trip in particular, and the importance it has for people in the community, and any thoughts that it would be lost or diluted or diminished in any way would send shockwaves really for many people who are already marginalised in many ways and isolated, and more and more these days less people can afford cars, and in terms of the lack of capacity even to just do basic errands to make it to town or to go to medical appointments or whatever. So it is a very important and integral part of life in rural Ireland, and not necessarily places that are what we regard as extremely remote or isolated. If you're even 10 kilometres from the nearest town, it can be a chore and a task, and it can be worrying to be isolated. In principle, I welcome what is proposed, as long as other colleagues have said, it's not just a penny pinching exercise or sort of just trying to squeeze savings for the sake of. I mean, I think that we can end up with a better service that is more effective and efficient and takes into account natural hinterlands rather than just sort of local fiefdoms, if you like. I think that it is important that it is opened up in that way, and that if there is mergers, that it can lead to a more effective and fruitful and efficient service, as long as common sense applies. We have had examples in this country where rationalisation, in my opinion, has not worked, where everything was merged and centralised. I think the health service is one such example. People were baying for years to close down the regional health boards. And I think it looked better on paper than it has worked out in real terms. And I think that we have to be careful not to make those mistakes. And if we learn from those mistakes in other areas, I think we can end up with a better rural transport service. Also, similarly with the rural hackney service, I think if common sense prevails, there need not be displacement. And yet, I know many people, even those running small businesses in rural areas, would be willing to step in and provide a service for customers and for clients and for elderly people who cannot otherwise avail of a service because it mightn't be economic to service that small market. I suppose the question I'd like to put is that we're around to the time of year again when colleagues around this table will all be inundated with requests from parents who have children who cannot get a school bus in rural areas to a nearest school. And in fact, in some scenarios, we have the bizarre and absurd situation, as far as I'm concerned, where the school bus actually passes by the child on the road. In some instances, even picks up their sibling, brother or sister, and leaves them there. And this is a role and an area where I think the rural transport system can actually step into the breach. Again, if common sense was to apply rather than demarcation lines, which I think are absurd, the way the service is currently operated, via bus air and so on, the school bus service. I think there is role for the rural transport system and the rural transport network to step into that vacuum, where I know, for instance, like small villages like the Swan, they have to traverse to the nearest secondary school, which could be 10 kilometres away, in places like Ballykill or the opposite direction and so on. And at the same time, the official school bus is passing them by, and it could be that the rural transport bus is not permitted or it's not going at the appropriate time. And it's a shame, in my opinion, to see two buses really in the one place, both half full or half empty, whichever way you want to look at it, and neither of them really fulfilling the service that's required for children, students and parents. So that's an area I'd like, if you could comment on, to see if there's some scope for improvement for rural transport for schools for children. That's the question I'd like to put.
Okay, thanks, Senator.